The #1 Team Rocket event we've ever seen in Pokemon Go is starting right now, and you need to know how to maximize on it. I know you guys have been waiting for this one. Let's get into it. So the Team Go Rocket Takeover October 2023 is going down October 26th at 10 a.m. to October 31st at 8 p.m. First of all, bonuses during the event. Team Rocket balloons will be appearing more frequently, generally every 3 hours, and Team Rocket will be appearing more frequently at Pokestops. You'll also be able to use a regular or an elite charge gem to remove the charge attack frustration from any of your shadow Pokemon. Normally you can't remove frustration from your shadow Pokemon, but during this limited portion, you can get rid of it and then it'll never come back, allowing you to use the regular move pool on your shadow Pokemon. We'll also have an increased number of shadow raids during this event. Also, during this event, we're gonna have new shadow Pokemon from grunts. That includes Shadow Ghastly from the Ghost Grunt, Shadow Rhyhorn from the Ground Grunt, Shadow Barboach from the Ground Grunt, Shadow Cranidos and Shadow Shieldon from the Rock Grunt most likely, Shadow Drillbur from either the Steel Grunt or the Ground Grunt, and Shadow Litwick from the Ghost Grunt or the Fire Grunt. The leaders, Arlo, Cliff, and Sierra, are also getting new shadow Pokemon. Starting off with the least exciting Arlo, which will now have Shadow Bellsprout, which can of course be shiny Shadow Bellsprout. That will then go into Sierra, which will now return with Shadow Sableye, which can be shiny Shadow Sableye. I'm pretty excited for that one. But the big one everyone's gonna care about, Cliff, who will have Shadow Dratini, which can now be shiny Shadow Dratini. Yes, everyone's gonna be going after that. Shiny rate for all of them, by the way, 1 in 64. Also, another new shadow we're getting is gonna be Shadow Lugia. Well, technically not new, but it will be able to be shiny from Shadow Raids going down October 28th, 10 a.m. to October 29th at 8 p.m. So we're gonna have a weekend to raid Shadow Lugia, and of course you can get this Shadow Shiny. Counter guide soon for that. Also, another new Shadow Regigigas returning from Giovanni, which means until the next Team Go Rocket event, you will be able to encounter a Shadow Regigigas if you battle Giovanni. More on that later. Of course, we'll have 1-star Shadow Raids for Ghastly, Grimer, Mischievous, and Litwick, 3-star Shadow Raids for Nidorino, Nidorina, and Golbat, and 12-kilometer eggs during the event will be hatching Larvitar, Sandile, Ponyard, Vullaby, Dino, Pancham, and Salandit. We also have some exclusive field research tasks during the event. The only task will be defeat 2 Team Go Rocket Grunts for a mysterious component. Okay, with the event details of the way, let's get right into the tips, starting with the new best shadow Pokemon you want to get during this event, and there's a lot of them. Now, to best show you guys how strong these shadows and which ones you want to get, I'm going to be using Game Press spreadsheet, which breaks down the DPS and TDO of each Pokemon in Pokemon Go. TDO stands for total damage output, DPS stands for damage per second. Let's start with Shadow Gengar, which evolves from Shadow Ghastly. Now, unfortunately for PvP, this thing probably won't be good because it's just going to die in 2 hits, but you might be able to make it work, but it's not the greatest. But as far as raids go, if we're going to be going ahead and here and sorting by overall attackers, you will see Shadow Gengar here, number 4 overall behind Mega Gengar, Mega Banette, and Shadow Chandelure. Look at this DPS, man. 21, almost 22 DPS. That's insane. This thing will be a glass cannon in raids, but it will output a lot of damage if you use it in raids. Also, of course, we can talk about Shadow Litwick right now. As you can see, Shadow Chandelure being the number 1 overall non-mega ghost type ray attacker in the game right now with Hex and Shadow Ball. Crazy good DPS and good overall bulk. Definitely one of the best Pokemon to grab during this event. That moves on to the ground type, which is getting a little bit of a change up here. As we can see, obviously Primal Groudon, Mega Garchomp, Shadow Garchomp being very good, but Shadow Excadrill taking the number 2 overall spot. Good DPS of 20, good TDO. Overall, a great ground type ray attacker if you get some good IVs from those grunts during this event. Also, if we move a bit further down, we'll see Shadow Rhyperior here as well. Not as good as Shadow Excadrill or Shadow Mamoswine or Garchomp if you have those, but if you do end up getting them, you can use them here. Decent DPS, good TDO. But where Rhyperior will be a lot stronger is going to be in the rock type category. As you can see here, overall, Shadow Rhyperior taking the number 1 spot. Legacy move Rock Wrecker, so you're gonna have to use an elite charge jam to use that, but a great DPS, great TDO. It's gonna be a broken rock type ray attacker. If we're gonna move a bit further down though, we will see Shadow Rampardos evolving from the new Shadow Cranidos. Still very good, number 2 overall non-mega, and it has an insane DPS, 22.5. That is such a high DPS Pokemon. If we actually want to look at the highest DPS in the game, Shadow Mewtwo is obviously gonna be the highest DPS non-mega, but you'll see Shadow Rampardos here is the number 2 overall. So it has the number 2 highest DPS, not including megas. Now, other than that, we do have Shadow Barboach, which is going to be evolving into Shadow Wishcash. Could be good in the Great League, definitely an interesting Pokemon there. And also Shadow Shieldon evolving into Shadow Bastiodon could be good in the Great League as well. But other than that, most of these new shadows from grunts are going to be very strong for raids. Okay, now let's talk about the leader Pokemon if they're any good. Starting off with Shadow Sableye from Sierra, which is a great Pokemon to grab because a purified version of Sableye is a great League Pokemon. Also, Arlo has Shadow Bellsprout, which of course can evolve into Shadow Victory Victreebel. We've seen Shadow Victreebel being an amazing Pokemon in the Great League, specifically on the Grass Hole team. Finally, that moves us into Cliff, which has Shadow Dratini, which Shadow Dragonite is an amazing Master League Pokemon, also a very good Dragon type raid attacker. I believe it's actually number like 2 overall. So to be honest, you can't go wrong with any of the team leaders this time because they all have some uses. And that moves us into Shadow Lugia in the Shadow raids, and is it worth getting? Now in the Master League, Shadow Lugia is going to be rank 40, meanwhile regular Lugia rank 23. And I think the reason for this is that Lugia is so tanky, and that's what makes it good in the Master League. So having the Shadow form, not as good. But Shadow Lugia and Shadow Shiny Lugia is still gonna be super rare Pokemon, super great Pokemon to grab, and you can still use it in the Master League. You can even use it in the Great League if you want to have some fun with a Shadow Lugia in the Great League. Overall, it's not a bad raid attacker to get. By no means the best raid boss ever, but still Shadow Lugia is super cool, and Shiny Shadow Lugia is gonna look insane. Also, if you want to take a look at the Shadow raids and what Pokemon will be good in there, obviously Shadow Ghastly we talked about being good for Shadow Gengar, and Shadow Litwick we talked about. But in the 3-star Shadow raids, we'll see Shadow Nidorina, which evolves into Shadow Nidoqueen. This Pokemon is going to be great in the Halloween Cup and other limited cup metas. Nidoqueen obviously to get nerfed, it used to be great, but still. Also Shadow Golbat's in there, which is good in some Halloween Cup stuff and also in the Great League. A great Pokemon to just get. And finally, that moves us into Giovanni's new Pokemon, Shadow Regigigas, and is that going to be any good? And overall, I'm going to tell you right now, don't get it. You see, unfortunately, Regigigas, although has like the highest CP in the game, I believe, it's not going to be a very good Pokemon. It just doesn't have a good moveset, and the Shadow is not going to help it in that aspect. So Shadow Regigigas is just going to be one of those Pokemon. If you get it, you're getting it for the Shadow Dex or just for the sake to have it. So if you don't want to do it, what you can do is a strategy I like to call stacking radars. Now, I'm not going to fully explain this strategy because it takes a while to explain, but the consensus and the basic strategy is to come when you get your special research story for the Shadow Regigigas. That does get you the Super Rocket Radar. You're not going to want to go past page 1 on this research. What this does is it makes it so every time we get a new Shadow Legendary alongside a new special research to get the Black Rocket Radar, you'll actually get it. Because if you actually go past page 1 of any of these researches, when a new one drops, for some reason you don't get it. I'm not sure why. As you can see, what I've done here is I do have Shadowy Skirmishes here on page 1 and also a Shadowy Disturbance. So when the new event starts, I will get the new one, whatever it ends up being called, and I can go ahead and just hold on to these researches. Then when a Shadow Legendary that drops that I actually care about drops, I can go ahead and just complete all these, get, 3 Black Rocket Radars, battle Giovanni 3 times, get, 3 Shadow Rayquazas, for example. If you guys want to learn more about the strategy, I have a full video breaking it down really in depth on every step you need to take, but it's really that simple. Nonetheless, if you don't want Shadow Regigigas, don't go past page 1 of the new research. Now, we do have an amazing bonus during the event, of course, removing frustration from your Shadow Pokemon. So I want to go through the fastest way I recommend doing this if you're in a rush or if you don't want to spend too much time, because it can take a while. What I recommend doing is coming into your search bar, searching at frustration, and this will show you all your Pokemon in your storage that have the move frustration. You can then go ahead and click on them here and then come to items in the item bag, charge TM, and use a charge TM. I can't remove it because the event hasn't started for me. And then you can just scroll through all these and they'll slowly remove. It's just a quick strategy. It's a small thing, but it can help you save some time when trying to remove frustration from some of your Pokemon. However, once you've removed frustration from some of these Pokemon, I actually don't recommend you evolve them yet. For example, a Pokemon like Metang here. Metang, if you evolve it into Metagross, needs a legacy move, Meteor Mash. But you don't want to use Elite TMs on it. So what I recommend doing is removing frustration from some of these Metangs. And then when we get an event where you can evolve Metang into Metagross to get Meteor Mash, you can go ahead and evolve all of your shadows that you already removed frustration from. Another example would be something like this Shadow Charmander. Charizard needs Blast Burn, so I'll wait until an event where I can evolve and get Blast Burn. This is just a great way to save on some TMs and get a bunch of legacy moves on some of your raid attacking Pokemon. Finally, that moves us into our last section, the Platinum Medal tips. You need 35 Platinum Medals to go from level 48 to 49 in Pokemon Go. Which one should you grind during this event? We'll start off by talking about the Hero Medal. Defeat 2,000 Team Rocket members. They're going to be more apparent at Pokestops in balloons. Defeat as many as you can to work on this medal. We'll also see the Purifier Medal. Purify 1,000 Shadow Pokemon. This is honestly one of the hardest medals to complete in Pokemon Go, but there is a strategy on how you can do it for easier. And that's going to be Purify the 1,000 Stardust Shadow Pokemon. Some Pokemon only take 1,000 stars to purify, saves you a bunch of Stardust. Let's go through what those are. Those include Shadow Weedle, Shadow Rattata, Shadow Alolan Rattata, Shadow Zubat, Shadow Geodude, Shadow Magikarp, Shadow Poochyena, Shadow Whismur, Shadow Aeron, Shadow Wailmer, Shadow Starly, Shadow Bidoof, Shadow Purloin, and Shadow Pidove. Purify any of those Pokemon. If you end up catching them, they're going to be the cheapest to purify to help you work on this medal. Finally, if you do plan on battling Giovanni, you'll be working on your Ultra Hero Medal. Defeat the Team Go Rocket boss 50 times. I only done this 13 times, but of course, it's a medal you complete during this event. And with that being said, guys, that is pretty much the Team Go Rocket event. Let me know if you're excited. I am so excited for this event. I plan on streaming it. Definitely come tune into the stream tomorrow starting at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you want to see me hunt some of those new shiny shadows and just get some of these new shadow Pokemon, it's going to be a blast. We'll see you in the next one. Follow for tips. Peace.